Oh, nice.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on teaching your technicians to sell. This presentation will be videoed and will be available in the video library of our website. Please feel free to ask questions, as it's often that we learn from one another. And just go to the comment section at the bottom of your screen or raise your hand. As a quick reminder, we have 4 more webinars throughout the rest of the year. November 1st is on our health insurance program. If you're looking for options for your health insurance, you don't want to miss it. LIG Solutions is the business partner of Scott. Then on the next day, November 2nd, will be how do I receive these rebates that I keep hearing about all the time, which I'm trying to want to show you something here. Let's do this. Okay, is that up there? You see those rebates?
I don't see them.
You're not seeing them. You still don't see them?
Oh, now we see them.
Okay, great. Okay, I'll move that out there. This webinar that we're going to have on how do you get your rebates. If you're not participating with this complimentary membership, as a member of Scott, you're leaving money on the table and you're definitely doing your company a disservice. If you see here, just as the majority, but there are still other companies that you would receive rebates from, and I'm sure you're doing business with some of these. So we want to talk to you about that, but be sure to log in on that webinar on the 2nd. And the last one, well, then we'll have December 1st will be our last technical training webinar. And that will be on, I've just lost, have y'all lost me?
I see you. I see you.
You see me. Okay, let me quit sharing my screen. How about that? Still see me all right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, I don't see y'all, so that's strange. Okay. But the last December 1st will be our last training webinar, which will be on heat pump gas, heating and gas furnace operation, including demand frost made simple. Doesn't sound simple to me. This presentation is both NATE and BPE certified for continuing education credits. And the last webinar of the year will be selling HVAC as a service subscription model for homeowners in need of alternative financing. This product is quite popular around the country and it's a great option for your customers. I saw this presentation in July and we wanted to bring it to you. Our presenter today is Tom Peregrino. It was announced last week that Tom will be taking Matt Michelle's position leading Service Nation. So we're pretty lucky to have him with us today. He was formerly Vice President of Coaching and Training for Service Nation's Alliance Premier Program, as well as the former owner of Daffin Cooling and Heating until 2021. His company was recognized for several achievements, including the 2020 Service Nation Alliance Contractor of the Year, the 2018 Chamber of Commerce Cornerstone Award, and the 2018 Service Nation Alliance Industry Trailblazing Award. I think we can see why Service Nation wanted to hire him. Tom is a John Maxwell certified coach and has coached and trained many contractors across the nation. No question, Tom has been in your shoes, and we're excited to have him with us today. Tom, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jackie. And thank you, everyone, for being here, taking time out of your schedule. As Jackie alluded to, let's see, Jackie, there we go. Perfect. As Jackie alluded to, I was a contractor for 21 years. I've been in your shoes, I've been in the trenches, and I know what it means for you to take time out of your schedule to spend time with Jackie and myself. So I hope to make it worthwhile. And every step of the way, as we talk a little bit about how to get your technicians to sell, every step, you guys feel free to jump in and ask a question. I value the questions, and a lot of times the magic happens in the questions you ask. And in like Craig's particular case, you know, if something triggers you, Craig, and now that Tony's on the call, if you guys have a specific question regarding something that I covered, let's stop and let's work on that. And in addition to that, as Jackie alluded to, when I sold my company in 2021, I couldn't retire. I was 50 years old. I couldn't retire. My wife certainly didn't want me at the house all the time, driving her crazy. And my heart over the last 21 years, my heart is for the contractors, the sacrifices and the risks that we take, the risks that you guys take every single day to try to build a profitable company, sometimes comes at a huge price. You know, you take so much time out of your schedule for your family. You know, who knows how many countless games that you miss, all the school events you miss when you're building your company. Your wives, if you're married, have to sacrifice a tremendous amount in order for you to succeed and build your company. And I was fortunate to have a wife in my particular case that just hung on and went on this wild ride of me building an HVAC company. And we were fortunate to be able to put ourselves in a position to sell the company in 2021. And shortly thereafter, because I love Service Nation so much, I truly do, I joined the team at Service Nation to build our coaching and training platform. And so the first slide that you see here is what I was tasked to do between 2021 and 2022, was build a very robust coaching and training platform. We've got over 33 coaches within Service Nation under Alliance Premier that they're all contractors and they're on standby. They're already working with lots of contractors all over the country to really jump into your business and get the results that you're looking for. Hence our motto, proven results fast. So as I go through my presentation here, you're probably it may come across a little bit different than what you're used to, because I'm a contractor. I think like a contractor, I talk like a contractor, and I just don't want to mess around. I want to make sure this is valuable for you guys, and hopefully you can get some things that you can immediately implement in your organization that will help you get your technicians to sell. And so with that, let's just jump in. So before we teach your techs to sell, we got to get a lot of work done prior to that. So let's talk a little bit about that. Before we even talk about how to get your technicians to sell stuff, you need to make sure as owners or management, if you're a service manager or your sales manager, you need to establish fair and reasonable expectations. So fair and reasonable expectations that should be communicated to your service techs, in this particular case, are the KPIs that you should be driving your company. The larger your company gets, and the more and more efficient it gets and profitable it gets, is typically in direct proportion to how well you're driving your company through key performance indicators, these KPIs. In my particular organization, we ran it all through KPIs. It was KPIs or die. Everything we tracked all of the metrics in every single department. Within Service Nation, whether you're an HVAC company or plumbing company or an electrical contractor, there are KPIs that you can measure your performance to industry expectations. Reasonable and fair key performance indicators, metrics that let you know whether you're on track or off track. If you don't have the long list of KPIs for your specific department, reach out to Service Nation Alliance and we can provide that information for you. If you're currently an affiliate and you haven't progressed to becoming a Service Roundtable member where you get more access to information regarding Service Roundtable, that may be another reason why to bump up your membership into our organization. But regardless, when you're talking to your service techs, they need to know what the expectations are. So you don't want to have the typical expectation of, guys, when you go on that service call, I need you to have a higher average ticket. That's not a reasonable expectation. What a reasonable expectation is the industry KPI for our specific area. So let's say we're talking about where Jackie's at, or I'm sorry, where Craig's at in terms of Hilton, South Carolina, based on our geographic area. The average ticket for a service repair, this is what the industry KPI average ticket for this repair. This is the reasonable and fair expectation. So they need to know what is the market driving in terms of what technicians should be bringing in terms of an average ticket for a service repair. Now, if you have selling techs and you have selling techs that are in a position to sell equipment, then you'll have a KPI that they need to drive towards, that they need to attain and strive to achieve. And so you need to set the expectations that, guys, when you have these calls that we're going on, we are measuring you to industry KPIs, and you need to work towards achieving that. They're fair and they're reasonable. In addition to that, if you look at the number of demand calls that you give your service technicians, there's KPIs that dictate what their performance should be on demand calls, as an example. So for example, if you're an HVAC company and in the course of a week, your service technician is given 10 demand calls, out of those 10 demand calls, it's a reasonable and fair expectation that they should provide 1 to 2 proposals to customers on new equipment. It's an industry statistic all across the country. If you're in 10 homes on a demand call, and if you're not familiar with the word demand call, that means if a customer calls in and says, hey, I got a problem with my unit, I'm not comfortable, I'm not sure what's wrong, they are calling in and demanding service. So you run out there. So in terms of setting expectations, that all will help you get your technicians to sell what they're supposed to sell. If they're on maintenance calls within a given week, let's just say, and they run 20 maintenance calls, out of the 20 maintenance calls, there's a reasonable expectation you should set for them that they should have 3% conversion rate to new equipment proposals. So if you get a chance, write some of those numbers down. That is the beginning of understanding how to run your business by KPIs. Over the course of a year, you sit down with a technician, if you're doing their annual evaluation, you said, listen, you were in 1,000 homes, you ran 1,000 demand calls. I know that's a lot. I'm just using that as an example. You ran 1,000 demand calls. You should have had 100 proposals, because that's 10%. You should have a 10% conversion rate to give proposals for new equipment. A high-performing service technician is going to be more around the lines of 20% conversion rate, okay? And so you look at your technician's numbers and you say, hey, you were only at 5%. So then that gives you an idea of what you possibly need to do to continue to train them to increase their conversion rate. So we talked about the conversion rate. And then we also talked about driving it by expectations. When it comes to selling equipment, assuming it's a 10% conversion rate, you take that 1,000 and they did 100 proposals at 10%. The reasonable KPI for a service tech in terms of closing rates, doing 100 proposals, is going to be a minimum of 75% or higher. So if they gave 100 proposals, they should be walking away 75% of the time with some type of equipment sale, whether it be a component or a system. Now, more often than not, depending upon where a contractor is on their journey, depending upon what their size is, they have not been keeping those stats. They haven't been tracking the stats. So to try to keep your people accountable, we need to have the what. What do we need to keep them accountable to? We need to keep them accountable to the fair and reasonable KPIs. From the moment they receive the demand call, you're tracking those KPIs in terms of average tickets. From the moment there's an opportunity to give them a proposal, you're tracking the KPIs in terms of their conversion rate of selling the equipment. And then further, what they sell and the average ticket they sell, you should be tracking what their average ticket and comparing that to reasonable and fair KPIs. So if you are currently really frustrated because your technicians aren't bringing in the right average ticket, or they're not selling equipment like they should be selling, if they are selling, they're not selling it at a high enough average ticket, take a look at the expectations you first set in the beginning. More often than not, you haven't set the right expectations. You haven't learned how to track what their performance is. And all too often, if you find yourself in that boat, what you typically will do is you'll just manage out of frustration. Guys, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to tell you guys anymore. I get you into these homes. You're supposed to be giving them options and you're not giving them options, and you resort to managing by yelling. Now, why do I know that to be the case? Because over 21 years, in my first 10 years, that's how I did it. And as I've been coaching, and my premier team has been coaching contractors all over the country, that's typically where most contractors start out at. They're just trying to push and yell and guilt their technicians into generating more revenue, but they haven't set the right expectations. Before I move on to the next, any questions on setting the right expectations? Okay. All right, let's talk about compensation. So in order to position your service techs to want to sell, you need to make sure that you design their compensation accordingly. Okay. So for example, if you're frustrated that the service techs are not converting the demand calls to maintenance customers, how are they currently being compensated? Just yesterday, I was talking to one of our members and I asked them that specific question: what do the service techs get if they sell a maintenance agreement? And the contractor said, nothing, they just get their hourly pay. And I said, well, how many service memberships do you have? Maintenance memberships do you have? Hardly any. I can't get them to sell it. Why would they? Why would they? So in terms of compensating them, you want to make sure that you've got a compensation structure, specifically if we're talking about maintenance agreements, that you give them something, a little spiff, depending upon if you have one maintenance agreement program or you may have a 3 maintenance option program. It's typical that we see that you give them some type of spiff, whether it be $10 or $20. There's some contractors out there that give them an initial spiff and then they give them an extra dollar per month if they continue to renew. And then that builds up over time. It's kind of like golden handcuffs. But they need to have some type of motivation to do that. The other thing is we find out oftentimes that the maintenance agreement doesn't have enough sizzle to motivate the service technician to sell it. So when they're going over the maintenance plan with the customer, there's not a whole lot to it. The most common flaws that we see is the discount isn't significant enough to convert the customer over to the maintenance plan. For example, 10% is probably not going to move the needle. If your maintenance plan is at 10%, it usually takes much greater skill to sell the maintenance plan. If you change that discount plan to 15, you're going to see more traction. If you change the discount to 20%, you're going to see even greater traction. A lot of the contractors that have moved their discounts to 20% are seeing the needle move much faster. Now, I don't want the 20%, if you go the route of 15 or 20%, I don't want that to cost money out of your pocket. So make sure you adjust your pricing accordingly. But if a service tech is on a demand call and the repair is $1,000 and the discount is only 10%, the customer is typically not psychologically motivated to buy the maintenance program because all they're going to save is $100. But if you have 20%, then not getting on the maintenance program is more painful for them because now they've got $200 on the line. So there's things that you can do before you position them to sell that will set them up to be able to sell more for you. And that's an example of some of the things that you can do on your maintenance plan. In terms of options, so if you have service technicians that are in a repair situation, you want to make sure that they are properly trained and that they have a way to automatically give the customers options. So oftentimes on a sophisticated level, that is, they have an iPad and they have some type of software that automatically populates options. Some of the companies out there that do that real well is like the new flat rate. The new flat rate has just a menu of options that automatically pop up based on the initial diagnosis, the initial repair, and then additional options the customer can take a look at doing. So are you currently set up where your service techs can easily display options? Or more often than not, are you like a lot of the contractors out there where the service techs have to find all these different options, build these different proposals, and it's just additional work. So it's not uncommon that they just don't do it. You got to make it easy for them. Easy to show the customer, easy to display, and then as you'll see here later on, easy to track after the call. And the last, in terms of equipment, how are you compensating your service techs if they can sell equipment for you, if they're selling techs? Or how are you compensating them if their role is to flip it over to a comfort consultant? But for now, let's just dive into if they're selling techs. So if they're selling techs, what do they get if they sell a component? What do they get if they sell a system? If you allow them to sell multiple options on a system, let's just say like in good, better, best, what do they get? And is the amount that they get more enticing than them staying to do a repair? More often than not, what we see is that the spiff that they get to sell a system is not balanced with the value they get of doing the repair. So for your typical service tech, when they come into the industry, they really don't understand. And when they finally do understand how important their role is to make sure they have a high average ticket, make sure that they're selling the equipment. Oftentimes, if you don't make the process smooth and easy for them, they're going to resist it. They're going to resist it because initially they thought they were coming in to just fix stuff. And now you're trying to train them to do something different. And so take a look at your compensation on equipment. I wouldn't be surprised if you may need to adjust that. Maybe take that to the next level. You may want to structure it where, let's say you give them $100 if they sell a good system, $200 if they sell better, $300 if they sell the best system. You may want to structure it where you add another $100 to each one of those and see if that moves the needle. Of course, adjust your pricing so it doesn't come out of your pocket. You can also structure it where if they do a proposal and you verify that the proposal was done by doing a follow-up call after the proposal is done, you can give them a spiff for just doing a proposal. That takes the pressure off of them of doing that extra effort with the fear that what if I don't sell it? I have to present these system options to this customer and they might reject me and tell me no. So what can you do as an owner to alleviate some of that pain and the fear of rejection? Well, what you can do is just spiff them for giving a proposal as long as you validate to make sure it was a legitimate proposal. Any questions on the compensation, whether it's maintenance, repair options, or equipment options? The other thing I want to share with you overall in regards to some of the frustrations you have on getting your techs to sell is it may be ultimately tied to your overall compensation of your technicians. And so what I mean by that is you may be a contractor whose current compensation is primarily hourly. You may be a contractor whose technician compensation is primarily a hybrid pay, a combination of hourly and maybe a percent of the service ticket, a percent of the equipment that's sold. Or you may be a contractor who's got service technicians that are set up as performance-based pay. So if you look at each of those compensation models, there's pros and cons with each of those compensation models. Okay. There's negatives to hourly, there's negatives to hybrid, and there's negative to performance. There's positives for each one as well. So let me just quickly talk about some of the frustrations I see if you're currently at an hourly compensated model, where a majority of their pay is based on hourly, and maybe they get some additional spiffs for whatever. But if you currently have a service department where it's primarily hourly, there is no natural motivation for them to work faster or more efficient. So if you look at the pros and cons of hourly, it's pro service tech. The slower they work, the more money they make. The slower they work, the more overtime they get. There's no benefit to working faster and more effectively. And as a matter of fact, if you as the owner or manager over the service department try to get them to work faster and more efficiently, it's no surprise that you'll probably get resistance because there's nothing in it for them. It'll be no surprise that a service technician, when they are being pushed to do more calls, to work faster, in their minds, oftentimes they're thinking, why? Why should I work faster? You're just going to throw more calls on me. And so it's really hard to hit your KPIs when you have an hourly compensation model, because it's heavily weighted to the benefit of the technician, not to management. When there are contractors that are hitting their KPIs with service techs that are hourly compensated, it usually requires really, really hard, firm, conflict-oriented management to drive their performance when they're hourly compensated. And oftentimes, if that's the case, if they're having to always hammer these guys to work harder and faster, those companies typically will have some of the highest turnover rate in their service department, because that hourly compensation is constantly in direct conflict with management. Now let's compare and contrast that to performance-based pay, the other side of the spectrum. If you have service technicians that are based on performance-based pay, okay, that's heavily weighted towards benefiting management. And if a service technician is able to make that mind shift to do performance-based pay, which is another challenge all to itself, that's some of the cons of performance-based pay, is because your typical technician can't change their mindset of being 100% commission-based. But if you are able to make that shift and you are at performance-based pay, one of the negatives to performance-based pay is that oftentimes you will allow or have people come in that don't have the right morals and ethics and will abuse the customers in order to fill the company's coffers and fill their own pockets. So when it comes to managing through performance-based pay, it's a lot easier to hit your KPIs, but oftentimes you may end up getting really bad reviews where customers feel like they're being taken advantage of. If you're not properly screening your technicians in the onboarding process, if you're not really driving down deep into their temperaments, their morals, and their ethics, you can unintentionally bring bad eggs in that can wreak havoc for your company if you're not careful. Performance-based pay model also tends to have higher turnover because it's very difficult for technicians to adjust their mind to that type of pay. The hybrid in the middle is a little bit of the best of both worlds, requires a little bit more management than performance-based pay. You still got to be careful at who you let in terms of those types of technicians. But just keep in mind, I bring that up because your overall compensation method is impacting how well your technicians sell. Any questions on that? All right. Make sure your service technicians are set up to be able to finance equipment if the opportunity presents itself. Also, if a service technician's ticket is over $1,000, make sure they're positioned well to be able to finance that. That's not uncommon. That makes it a lot easier for the consumer to go with that repair if the repair is the thing that makes the most sense. But in terms of equipment, does the technician know how to finance equipment? Do they have that technology on their phone or on the iPad? If they do, have you role played how well they present the financing options? What financing options have you given them? Do they have the ability to do 6 months, no payment, no interest? Do they have the ability to communicate that the top of the line equipment can get 5 years interest free, so on and so forth? So for sure, if you have selling techs, they absolutely have to have financing capability, and they need to be well trained on how to utilize that. And dispatching tips. In order to position your service techs to sell, you want to make sure that your CSRs and your dispatchers are gathering the proper information to position your service techs for success. So we want to know the age of the home. We want to know the age of the equipment. All that information is going to position the service tech to have the expectation of what the average ticket should be. If it's an old home and it's got old equipment, then management sets a reasonable expectation that we should have a high average ticket. And if not a high average repair ticket, then we should have a high lead conversion rate on giving them a proposal to replace their equipment. So the CSRs and dispatchers are also a key part of positioning your service technicians to sell. One of the big things we see that's deficient in a lot of service technicians is there's not a lot of soft skill training. I wouldn't be surprised if I walked into your organization and I looked at the amount of time you spent doing technical training versus the time you spent doing soft skills training. Then more often than not, way more time is spent doing technical training than soft skills training. And it's the soft skills training that is going to yield the greatest results in terms of technician selling. I'm not saying get rid of technical training. You got to have technical training constantly. But the ratio of technical training to soft skills training needs to be, let's just say 50-50, okay? The more and more experienced a technician gets, the more and more you want to set up their training and their career path where less and less training they're getting is technical, and more time they're spending in the office for service tech training is on soft skill training. When they're a basic tech or a junior tech, of course, a lot of what you're doing is technical training. So you should have some type of training program where you're mapping out how many hours of technical training they're getting, and over time that should decline. And then as they're in the organization longer, they should continue to get more and more soft skills training. I hope that makes sense regarding that. One of the best things to teach your technician is the disc profile. So getting your technicians to understand their own disc and the customer's disc profile is really, really, really important in terms of yielding the results you're looking for. As the owner, you need to really understand how your technicians are wired. You need to understand how they communicate. You need to understand how they perceive the world, and you need to understand how they react to their perception of the world. And the easiest tool to teach that to the technicians and then teach the technicians how to understand their customers is through DISC, D-I-S-C. Hopefully you guys have heard of DISC before. If you're not utilizing DISC, I highly recommend you integrate DISC training into your organization. So really quickly hitting the highlights on DISC. What DISC will do is it'll identify who your technician is. Are they a high D in that terminology, where they are dominant? They prefer to dominate a situation. Are they a high I, where they prefer to influence using words? Or are they a high C, where they're very critical thinkers, conscientious, highly analytical? Or are they a high S, where they prefer to keep everything calm and stable and consistent? If you don't know how your service technicians are wired, you don't know how to properly motivate them. You don't know how to properly communicate to them. That all impacts their ability to sell. Once you get very proficient at understanding who your technicians are, they become very proficient at understanding who they are themselves. Then they know how they can best receive training. They know how best to communicate to the customer, and you will see a difference in terms of how they sell. One of our vendor partners, and Jackie showed you all the vendor partners that we have that you can get rebates on. One of the vendor partners that we have that can get you set up to utilizing DISC assessments for all your team members, and then teaching how to understand how the customers are wired, is this company here, Service Excellence Training. If the website is down below, I added that, and that will that'll get the ball rolling on that. And all along the way, you know, as I do this presentation, I want you to know that if you have any additional questions, or if you need additional resources, if you're not sure about anything, you know, Jackie's got my contact information. I can do the best I can to help you and direct you to those that can help you as well. I don't want to leave you guys hanging at all. So DISC is very important. That needs to be added to your soft skills training, that hopefully you'll do more and more and more, because you'll see a difference in how the techs sell. The other thing that's very, very important that will impact the results from getting your technicians to sell is what takes place after the call. So oftentimes what we see when we're analyzing contractors' processes and systems regarding their service department, they don't have a very good process after the call. So one of the things that would help you as a contractor in terms of your service technicians performing better is if you had your CSR do a debrief, or maybe your dispatcher do a debrief. So that's where the service technician calls in and says, hey, I finished up Mrs. Jones. We got her all taken care of. And you review what they entered into either Service Titan or Service Fusion or House Call Pro. You review what options they gave the customer. You want to make sure those options are in your software. Having a debrief done after the fact is very, very helpful, especially in the beginning of setting the expectations that they need to give the customer options. If it's a repair only situation, you want to make sure on the debrief that they gave the customer the options on the repairs. If it was repair to equipment opportunity, you want to make sure that they gave those options. That's all part of accountability. The debrief will also provide a lot of information for you to focus on what to do training on. So if you're doing daily debriefs after every single service call, your CSRs and dispatchers will communicate that information to you on what the technician is doing or not doing. And that's very, very valuable because that will help you craft much, much more effective training for your service technicians. And what they're deficient on, what they're not doing. For example, let's say you have a technician that's not giving options like they should, and the CSR shared that with you. So then the next training session you have, you're going to do role playing on giving customers options. Role playing is very painful for the service tech, but you got to do it. You got to do it. In time, they get used to it, but they would still prefer to come to a technician's meeting and not do it. But you got to do it. Constant and never ending role playing. Many of you that own your own company probably were out in the field at one point in time. And so you will know through role playing whether or not they do it on a consistent basis. What you can tell in the role playing whether or not they're given options on a consistent basis. You'll see it because you were out in the field too. You'll be able to catch it. No, man, you're not doing it all the time. You're just trying to tell me what I want to hear. So role playing is really, really effective before they go on the calls in terms of your daily training, and then afterwards as you continue to refine their performance. And then the last thing I've got for you guys is follow-up is very, very important. Okay. Some companies call these the happy calls, but let's just call them a follow-up. So I want to encourage you guys to build into your processes and systems, especially if they're not hitting the KPIs you want them to hit. You got to do this. You need someone in the office to call that customer and follow up on the performance of that technician. So that's an easy phone call to make. They say, hey, Mrs. Jones, I understand that John was out there yesterday. Did he get you taken care of? And that's great feedback to get no matter what. And then from there, they start going into what we call the rehash, or trying to help the technician close any additional options or the sale of the equipment. And so that CSR or dispatcher, depending upon their skill set, will say, well, that's great. Well, I see here that he got your unit up and running and he gave you these other options. You know, are you going to look at it? Are you going to take a look at going with any of those options in the future or now? And then listen to what they say. And what they say is going to tell you how well the technician is doing presenting those options to the customer. You would be surprised. Oftentimes you'll hear, well, I really didn't understand what he was saying on those other options. That's good to know. You want to get that information so you can build that into your training. Or they may say, what options? I don't know what you're talking about. That's critical information, because that lets you know you may have a service tech that's pencil whipping your processes and systems. They're just putting in options in your software. They're never presenting it to the customer. That happens. It happened in my company before. You want to try to catch it as fast as you possibly can. Follow-ups are really, really valuable, especially if you find out that they gave them a proposal on new equipment. Statistically, within 36 to 72 hours after your service tech gave them a proposal and they didn't say yes to the proposal, there's a super high probability they're going to buy from someone. And it's usually not you unless you can intercept that through the follow-up. So as you're going through the follow-up process and you say, oh, I saw that John gave you a proposal on a new piece of equipment. What did you think? Is there, are you going to go with one of those options? No, the price is too high. Oh, thank you for sharing that with me. Is it okay if I share that with my boss, my manager, and maybe there's something we can do to help you out? Oh yeah, sure. There is an HVAC company in Oklahoma that implemented a very consistent follow-up process. And within 12 months, they had an additional $1 million of revenue just by implementing a follow-up process after every single call. There's a lot of money that we leave on the table by not having a very good follow-up process. The technicians in the beginning, they may be a little leery of the follow-up process, like it's Big Brother watching them. But when the CSR and dispatcher help them close sales that they tried to sell on that call, they're going to end up loving the CSR and dispatcher. They're going to end up saying, hey, I just finished giving a proposal to Mrs. Jones. I think she's going to buy. Can you call her real quick and just see if everything went okay, if I missed something? And you guys start tag teaming and working together as a partner. You'll see some amazing results. And with that, let's switch it over to Q&A and see if you have any questions. Craig, do you have any questions?
Yes. We have a different kind of market over here in Hilton Head because we're mostly rental properties. And so the customers aren't dealing with the homeowners face to face because it's normally the rental agency. So we have to send all our quotes and things to the owners or the property managers, and then it goes from there. But it's a different selling market, so we're not doing the compensation on selling because we're not dealing with the customers directly or upselling or anything like that. Because mainly they're all rental properties on Hilton Head.
So Craig, just to make sure I understand you right, what percentage of the revenue that you bring in per year is rental property? Just ballpark.
I would say probably 85%. And then
85%?
the rest is just, yes, because we deal with, I think, 6 or 7 different management companies on Hilton Head. And that's our main customer base. And then we have, other ones that are just homeowners, but that's probably about 15% of the business. So mostly it's just, we have door codes to get into houses and things, and we go there and assess the situation and then either, repair the system or, because, Hilton Head, we're on the coast here, so the units rot out and we're on the 8-year plan. That's about as long as they last before they start falling apart really bad. But it's just a different market than the normal average dealing with a homeowner face to face every day. So
Sure, gotcha. So on the financial side, do you use QuickBooks?
Yes.
Okay. Now, regarding QuickBooks, on your profit and loss statement, your income statement, do you have your rental division, your rental department, do you have that separated by class?
I would have to ask Ashley. I'm not sure on that part.
And the reason why I say that is because it is such a huge bulk of your business. You really need to analyze that completely separate from the rest of your business.
Yeah.
So ideally what you want to have is you want to have a separate column in QuickBooks on your profit and loss statement. You want to have a separate column that shows rental equipment. It shows all the costs of goods, the revenue that comes in, the cost of goods sold to get that revenue, the materials and the labor. You want to know what your gross profit is on the equipment, and then you want to see how your overhead is impacting it, and you want to see what your net profit is for your rental equipment. You need to know that.
Okay.
Then you also need to know what is happening on the service side of my rental. So you need a separate class for rental for service. So you got all your service revenue coming in, all the materials and labor it takes to get the repairs done, what's left over for gross profit, and then how overhead impacts that. Without that information, you're flying blind.
Right. Okay.
Okay. If you currently have a QuickBooks profit and loss statement where all of it is mixed in together, all you can see is just a big clump of information. What you need to know in order to run your company as effectively as possible, you need to know the dynamics of each one of those: rental equipment, rental service, and then the rest if it's only 15%.
Okay.
What you're going to find out is you're going to look at the bottom line. When you get all that work done and you separate it out by class, and that's a lot of work to do, but it's well worth it. You're going to look at the bottom line and you're going to be able to find out how truly profitable is my rental on the equipment side. How truly profitable is it on the service side? And what's my profit, net profit in terms of everything else?
Okay.
That's going to help you make much, much wiser decisions. And it's going to help you, if you find out that on your equipment rental profit and loss state by class, if you find out that you're not cranking out consistently high double-digit net profit, then effectively you're losing money. If you find out on your service department that your net is consistently negative, that's a problem. Then you need to go find out, how do I need to do to increase the efficiency of my entire company in terms of those classes? What do I need to do to get these guys more efficient and more effective? You know, as you start analyzing different management companies, you may find out as you start digging into the numbers, once you get the numbers to analyze, you may find out, ooh, this one property company, we need to go up on rates and risk possibly losing them because they're costing us money, potentially.
Right.
And to that point, in terms of raising prices, how many times did you raise prices this year due to inflation?
I think we did it twice this year.
Okay. Is 2022 great? Is your revenue from 2022 greater than 2021?
Let me look and see. Go on this page here.
Jackie, let me know if I'm coming across too serious. Sometimes I just get really intense getting into this stuff.
No, but I was going to offer to what you were saying is to tell Craig that we do have a worksheet that his accountant can use to fill in these numbers to break out the overhead and the management cost, you know, the whole thing that Service Nation provided us. And in fact, we even did a webinar on it some time ago. And Craig, I could probably see to it that you could even watch that webinar when they reviewed that P&L. But it does exactly what Tom's talking about by separating your different income sources, if you will. You know, it's all HVAC, but no, there's, you know, like you mentioned with the rentals and maintenance, et cetera, and, you know, separate your service agreements out as well. You'll want to know what your, you know, revenue is on them. But I'm happy to send that to you, and I'm sending you the link to the webinar, and that will kind of what he was referring to. You'll see it on there, and if you have some questions, I can put you in touch with the right people that can help you with that.
Okay. Yes, that'll work, and I'll get that to Ashley and Cindy too. We are up on our margins and stuff like that, but you know, we've had increases on everything with the equipment and parts pricing and all that. Everything's gone up, but I'd have to really dig into it to see where we're at.
Yeah, so take a look at that. Your typical HVAC company, well, your typical contractor should be up a minimum, all things being equal, they should be up a minimum of 10% in top line revenue year over year in order to adjust to price increases. We have contractors that are up 15 to 20% just based on adjusting to price increases, not only on equipment, but you had to pay your guys more. Your fuel was more expensive. Maybe your rent went up, your electricity went up. And so if you're not up over 10% or more, preferably if you're not up at least 15% year over year, then you didn't adjust your pricing fast enough. And you need to make those changes. You'd be surprised at how much the overhead is affecting the need to increase your pricing. Most contractors are just tracking their equipment price increases and adjusting their prices accordingly, but they're not adjusting their prices based on how their overhead is also inflating. And the ones that are really good at that, You know, their natural, no, not natural growth. Their growth due to inflation is 15 to 20%. And then as they drive through marketing, as they drive in terms of eating market share, as they're expanding with more and more reviews, you know, year over year, we have high performing contractors that have grown 30 to 40% this year. Because when you take a look at how inflation caused a lot of that growth, you know, it was a huge bump. Does that make sense?
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, I've got one.
Tony doesn't
one
have
minute.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I had 1 minute left. Tony, I know you got a question.
He says he doesn't have a microphone. He sent us a nice copy.
Okay.
One thing that I would like to add, you know, just like with your disc, each individual has certain strengths and certain weaknesses. And sometimes if you say the word sell, people like, if I was a salesman, I'd be out doing sales, you know, I'm a technician, I'm whatever. So it's almost like a play on words that you have to make the S word service, but you're doing your client, your customer a disservice if you don't talk to them about the risks they take without maintenance agreements and what their utility costs are being impacted by this, you know, dated equipment, et cetera, et cetera. And so sometimes with, you know, different people, you have to approach differently. And if you just tell them, I want what your sales, you need to be selling more, it just goes on deaf ears. It's like, you know, it's just like the deer with the headlights. And so the fact that they're doing a disservice if they're not, you know, and maybe that's another angle to use with these guys as well.
Yeah, if we had more time, to your point, Jackie, if we had more time, we would talk about how critical it is for the owners to have a compelling mission, to have compelling core values, to have a compelling reason why the technicians need to do these things. Because to your point, it's not selling. We need, if we are the best, then the best give options. We all want options. We don't walk onto a parking lot looking for a car and only have one option. We want to see all the options, whether we can afford them or not. Just allow us the courtesy of having the options. So yeah, if you come at it from a pure direction, then they will naturally do the right thing, which is selling. But it's really just taking great care of the customer.
Mm-hmm.
Taking great care of them. VIP treatment. Yeah.
Exactly. Tony, Craig, thank you all so much for participating, and I'll see to it that you get a copy of the presentation. Tom, this was wonderful. Thank you. Congratulations on your huge promotion. We're excited for you. We look forward to working with you. And with that, I will say good afternoon to everyone. And Tony has expressed his appreciation as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for
Good
your
to
time.
be with you guys. Thank you for your
Bye-bye
time.
now.
Bye-bye.